Hi folks, I'm Matt and welcome to My Expanding Universe, a show where I go through the entire EU in chronological order as best I know how. And folks, it is finally time for the moment of truth, which is actually book 7 in the Jedi Quest series by Jude Watson, which is what you should read next. In this book, it's about Anakin and Obi-Wan, and they're on a rescue mission to retrieve scientists from the planet Typho Dar, and who have crucial information about a neighboring planet's impending invasion. Ooh, what happens? Who knows? The best thing to note about this book is that Obi-Wan and Anakin fall into a Gundark's nest. Yes, where the part in the movie where they mention the Gundark's nest, this is the story. Now, I always knew that story would pop up in the EU. The moment I saw it on the screen, I went, oh yeah, that's going to be an EU story. I knew it was coming. And I wasn't that surprised that Jude Watson put it in there because I knew someone would. And it's funny, it doesn't take, that's not really the point of the book. It's just an instance that happens along the way. But still, it is fun to read. Now, after book 7, you want to slip right into Jedi Quest 8, which is the Changing of the Guard. In this one, Obi-Wan and Anakin are trying to track down Zan Arbor, who's working for Granta Omega. Now, they're of course searching for Granta Omega, who's the main villain of the series. And Zan Arbor should sound familiar because I spoke about her in the Jedi Apprentice series. Now, another thing that I really like about Jude Watson here, she takes the Jedi Apprentice characters and transports them over to Jedi Quest. Zan Arbor was a villain who got away, and that always bothered me. And the fact that they brought her back in Jedi Quest, I was like, all right. See, because here they already have an established villain that you've already hated, you know, and you hated what she did to Qui-Gon in Jedi Apprentice. So now that she's back in this one, you're like, oh yeah, get her, get her. And of course she's working for the main villain in Jedi Quest, of course. But this wasn't the only character that she transported over there. There are several other characters I have not mentioned because I kind of want you to be surprised, and, well, pleasantly surprised. It's not a big reveal, but you're like, oh, so-and-so's back, or oh, I remember them from little, or oh, she was a Padawan, now she's a Jedi Knight or Jedi Master. That's awesome. And so there's a lot of that going back and forth within the Jedi Quest and Jedi Apprentice series. Okay, so the next book you read is, of course, Jedi Quest 9. It's The False Peace. Now, in this one, there's some anti-Jedi sentiment in the Senate, and it's developing on Coruscant, and a lot of issues are going on. Now, I'm very vague about this one because there's a lot going on in it. I don't want to ruin too much, like any surprises in there, too many spoilers. Not that there's anything really big that happens in this one, but there's a few surprising things. For two things I will talk about in this actual novel. One was that this is where it shows the budding relationship between Palpatine and Anakin. We see a little bit about that in the prequels. It's largely ignored during the Clone Wars because there was so much going on and they wanted to focus on the relationship with Obi-Wan and Anakin, which I agree with. But you still know in Episode 3 that Anakin and Palpatine are these best buddies, you know? They've been best buddies for a while. Well, you know that in 2 as well. And where did that all happen? Well, Jude Watson puts it in this book where they have a little bit of friendship. You know, Palpatine's the one trying to be a friend, but there's some anti-Jedi sentiment in the Senate, and that is actually foreshadowing what happens in Episode 3. One of the things that may not make sense to the wizened, you know, moviegoer is that when they were watching Episode 3 and they said, hey, how come everyone is against the Jedi at the drop of a hat? I mean, when you think about it, the Jedi were the heroes of the Clone Wars, right? I mean, the big heroes. They were the generals. They were leading victory after victory after victory. And Anakin and Obi-Wan's exploits were like heroic. So why would they all of a sudden, within one day, just totally turn on the Jedi? Doesn't make sense if you're just looking at the movies. However, if you're reading the EU, it makes perfect sense. Especially how Jude Watson decided to build this up, saying, hey, there was some anti-Jedi sentiment a long time ago, a couple years before Episode 3. This has been building up through the years, and it was bubbling up. We didn't get to see much of it because in the Clone Wars, sadly, Senate stories were largely ignored. And they focused on the war, which I understand why. That's where the exciting stuff is going. But it would have been nice to see, maybe the Senate getting, upset with Jedi and maybe taking, things into their own hands too much. And I mean, there was a little bit of that from the Jedi standpoint, from the Clone Wars standpoint, but not from the side of the Senate, how they could see it. And I wish there was more of that. Jude Watson puts a little bit of it in here, which is one of the few instances that I can think of where we hear that there's a little Senate unrest with the Jedi. So for that reason alone, I found this book extremely interesting, just because of the plot points they were dropping. Now at this point, folks, the books were already out. I mean, the movie was already out. So you already knew what had already happened, but reading about it here, you're going, all right, I'm catching on to this. I'm seeing where they're going here. I'm liking it. All right, folks, that's all the time I have for today. Yub Nub and I will see you next week with... Hey, where is Yubs?